What's up, everybody? Jeff Cross here. You can contact me at jeffcross22@gmail.com. jeffcross22@gmail.com. Well, I hope everybody had a good New Year and a good Christmas, and their rest and relaxation is over. It's time to get back to work, and that includes me. So I'm gonna middle of December, I had put out a question on EduFi on topics, and I'm gonna try and answer all, if most of them, if not all of them, in this segment. So this segment will run longer. This will not be a 5-minute segment. This will be close to probably a 30, maybe a 40-minute segment. So just prepare yourself as you continue to watch that, and I'll put that on the label of the video too. So first things first, Chad Ozzie has decided to help me with this because he can read the questions and then maybe follow up with any other questions that come to your mind that maybe someone else is thinking. Chad is a first-year NCAA women's official. Works for Randy and Don and myself at KCC and a couple other people. Missy also. So he's going to help me with that and help keep me on track. And hopefully we can get some of these questions answered in a way that you feel comfortable in sharing and learning from. So remember, jeffcross22@gmail.com, and we'll go from there. Remember, it's going to be about 40 minutes. All right, Chad, let's get started with the first question.
All right, so we have a wide range of questions today, so I thought we'd start with something that just kind of happens at the beginning of the game. We had Shelly ask us, what's the point of a captain's meeting?
Okay.
So for you, not only what is the point of it, but kind of walk us through, what do you do when you go into your captain's meeting?
Sure. Well, the first thing is the point of the captain meeting is the rule book says we have to do it. So, unfortunately, that's just one of the things. And it does seem very mundane sometimes. But I think it's ultimately, to answer Shelley's question, the point is to introduce yourself. And this is not, your first communication with the player is not going to be at the 4-minute mark when you call an offensive foul on them. So you have some communication with the players. And you can take that time to tell the captains, what you're expecting tonight, what you can expect from us, things like that. I always introduce myself, if it's the holidays, hope you have a Merry Christmas, whatever that is. But I always cover a few things. One is I always cover what color headbands are they going to wear. So if the captains come to the meeting with black headbands, and I say, what color headband you guys wearing tonight? And they say black, so now I put that on them. I say, okay, can you make sure everyone wears black for us tonight? Done. Ask the other team, done. Of course we get the speaking captain, whatever it is. But and I even introduce people. Okay, I'm Jeff, Chad, and Mike. If we can help in any way, let us know, and we'll try and do that. I handle it, those kind of things. And then one of the other things that I always say in my captain's meetings, try not to forget, is it's imperative when the whistle blows that you stop playing. Spread that among the crew or the teams or whatever it is, because I use strong words like imperative, you must, all those things. I don't tell them the consequences, I just ask them that they need to do that. Because obviously if they don't, now we got unsportsmanlike fouls and it all piles up on us. So if we give them that heads up early, sometimes that helps. And one thing that I never do is I never say anything I'm not prepared to back up. So I never go into a captain's meeting and say, hey, remember no displacement in the post, or remember you have to get out of the lane, or whatever that is, or remember unsportsmanship is always expected, because if you don't, you're going to get a technical foul. Whatever it is, if I'm not prepared to back it up, so I try not to put myself in that box to make sure those things happen. So I think that's imperative.
So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you hear in a captain's meeting? What are the things that we're saying that we just don't need to say, or that's,
Yeah, I've heard people say, okay, it's the black line all the way around. Yeah, we got it. But, we've seen the floor. Now, if there's a question, if there's 2 lines or whatever it is, then that's fine. I hear people say, if we have 2 scoreboards, if one scoreboard goes out, this will be our official scoreboard. Well, I think we're making a mistake there, because what if the official scoreboard goes out? You said that would be the official. That means the game over? You know what I mean? So I hear things like that are it's just unnecessary. I hear things. I hear things that we talk about. I think I'm misleading here. So we don't say things that are obvious. I hear people say that all the time. I think one of the mistakes that I hear is make sure you bring your team out at the first huddle, ready to play at the second. Because it goes back to my previous statement. Now you've painted yourself into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because if you don't, you said, hey, and one team comes out, and you say, hey, in the captain's meeting, you said, bring out. They're not out, so now you got to give a resumption of play warning.
Mm-hmm.
And you put yourself in that corner. So I hear people say those things too, which is a big mistake, I think. So, but those are the big ones I hear. I hear things like this. Now you don't talk to them, and you don't talk to them. Geez, why don't you just put them in jail right now?
Yeah.
They're going to compete. Those kind of things. I think it's imperative that they know our names and they know that we are proud to be part of that event. So.
Okay. So then moving from the captain's meeting to kind of the beginning of the game, and obviously a lot of this is going to start in pregame and locker room and travel and all that kind of stuff. But, one of the questions that comes up a lot, and Mario's the one that brought it up for today, is how do you, especially as an R on the game, work to get your crew to be consistent that day?
Yeah, I think I remember him writing that down. So consistency from Mario. The best way I can tell you, first of all, I've said this a million times, consistency is a state of mind. If coaches believe you're being consistent, then you are. So one of our best ways to do that is to get the three people to just get along. We all, if we have three officials sitting at this table, they all know what the hand check rule is. So we should have no problem being consistent on that. We all know what displacement is. We all know what an out of bounds play is. We all know what traveling looks like. So that's not the hard part. The hard part is to get the three people to mesh as one, to be a chameleon and be together, so that way they can be more comfortable being consistent. We try so hard in talking about, we got to do the hand check, we got to do the post play, we got to do the 3 seconds, we got to do all those things. That's got nothing to do with us being consistent. We're just calling the rules as written. Now, consistent means we are on the same page. We can sense when our partner is going through trouble in getting to look at a play or whatever that is. So I think the best thing about being consistent is getting the three people to get on the same page mentally, just mentally. How are things going? They feel comfortable. They can speak out in the pregame. They can speak out during the game. Because you won't be consistent if you and I are in a game and you're afraid to say something to me. We're just not going to be consistent because you're keeping information to yourself. So it starts really, really early in the text before the game or whatever, 2 days, 4 days before the game, or the email or whatever it is. Some of the things I say in my text where if I'm the R and I reach out and say, I'm looking forward to seeing you, working with you also, but I'm looking forward to seeing you and getting to know you more or whatever it is, or catch up and we haven't seen each other in 3 weeks or whatever it is. Those are the things that make people want to do what's necessary for the game. So,
yeah. And we were just talking actually before we started shooting video today. You're not always the R on your games. I think some of us at the lower levels, because you're a clinician and things like that, we just kind of assume that something happens. But I mean, you were working a game at Michigan State the other day where you're not the R on the game. And so if you're not the R, and like lots of us who aren't the R on our games, how do you help consistency within the crew, even though you may not be in that vocal leadership person or assigned leadership position? How do you do that?
Well, I think you can still do it the same way. What's wrong with asking, how was your trip over? And hey, did you have a good Christmas? I saw you were working over at Bradley last week. How'd that go? I've just started a conversation. If I go to dinner with 4 people and I have a 85-year-old grandpa who's at the table who clearly runs the table, does that mean I can't talk to anybody else? I still open up those conversations. And sometimes we're looking for that. Sometimes crew chiefs, R's, whatever you want to call us, are looking for someone to start a conversation because it's been a busy week. You're mentally drained, whatever it is, you got to try and get out to the next spot. So you're looking for, hopefully somebody will just speak up and get the ball rolling. So, and I think that's what our U1s and U2s can do sometimes. Just start a conversation.
Yeah. And so then to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, we hear you talk about courage a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So then as a crew on the court now, once I'm on the court, you made the comment earlier that sometimes it takes more courage as a U1 or U2 to speak up than if you're the R on a game. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, say it one more time.
Yeah. So there are times where as the U1 or the U2 where you're not the lead dog.
Okay, right.
Okay? Where it takes just a little bit more courage to speak up on a play than if you were the R, you know you're going to step in and do X, whatever X is.
Yeah.
But now I'm not that, and the R doesn't step in and do that. It takes a little bit more courage for the U1 or the U2 to step up and say,
right.
Talk through that a little bit.
Well, I mean, courage is, it's something that is not, you don't wake up and have courage. It is, you have to practice it, and practice it, and sometimes it takes longer to build up. Sometimes a pot of coffee takes longer than a Keurig, where it only takes, 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it is, and the whole pot sometimes takes longer. So it's, you just really, I remember I had, a couple situations this year where I wasn't the R, and we had, difficult situations, and I can almost just feel myself breathing. You know what I mean? And talking to myself. Self-talk, I think, is what helps encourage. I'm just talking to myself and go, okay, did you really see what you saw? And you're looking at your partners, and you're looking at the time, and you're all the stuff is processing. You're listening for coaches behind you. All those things to help you muster up just enough courage. Now, you don't have to have the courage to come in and fix the play or fix the scenario. You just have to have enough courage to come in and leave the window open a little bit so everyone can open up the window and handle the play. But so many times, because that window's shutting, right? When it's shutting, we just feel like there's nothing we can do. And that garage door, right? When that garage door is going down, it's going down, we're like, it's almost shut. But if we just stick our hand into there, the sensor goes off and it comes back up for us. And it takes, we don't have to put our whole body through the garage door. We just got to stick our foot under there. We got to stick our hand in there enough to stop the door from shutting or the window from shutting. So that's what I would say about courage, is don't worry about having complete and fearless courage. Just have enough courage to ask one simple question, just enough to stop the movement of the door or the window shutting.
Okay. One of the things that we hear over and over, whether it's at clinics, camps, in the stuff that comes out from NCAA, all that, is that the things that really begin to separate good officials from great officials, from then excellent officials, is game management. A lot of times at that upper level, the play calling difference isn't real great. It's the way they handle all of the game management scenarios that goes on. And Amanda asks you to talk a little bit about the difference between what is good game management versus what is manipulation of the circumstances and the situation.
Yeah, game management versus manipulation, basically, right? First of all, I think you should never, ever, ever want to manipulate the game in your favor. We 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we used a little bit more manipulation than we did game management. We called it game management, but we were just manipulating the game. And it didn't make a difference in a 30-point ball game. It just doesn't make a difference. But as I've said before, we're training people. So when let's say we pass on an obvious foul in a 30-point game with 2 seconds to go, all we've done, because for all we know, that's the sub. That's the third string that's in there. And they've just made serious contact and didn't call a foul. And now they get in for the starting position, and they commit that same foul, and we blow a whistle. And the player is confused, because when they were in the last 2 minutes of the game, they didn't call a foul. So that's where manipulation is out. It's game management to me now is not call selection, not any of those things. We see them, we call them. Somebody said one time, "Oh, you're just waiting for the ball to go in." I said, "You're giving me way too much credit. I'm not that smart. I see the foul, I see the whole foul or the whole play, and I process it as a foul, then I blow the whistle. It's got nothing to do with the ball going in or not. It just didn't go in. That's all there is to it. So we need to continue to call those rules as written game management goes to how are you going to communicate? How are you communicating from walking in the door? You know, I see people walking in the doors all the time, and like, you know, they come through these double doors, like they got this big cape on, and you look out, excuse me, Super Jeff coming through, leave me alone, you know, those kind of things. And that just doesn't bode well for anybody. It doesn't bode well for the official that's doing it. It doesn't bode well for the two partners that are doing it. The coaches are already, they're keen to all that stuff. Because if you think about it, coaches go out all summer long and watch players play. They don't look at their numbers, they watch them play, and they watch how they interact with their teammates, and they watch how they interact with their coaches. Well, they're very trained at that. If you ask a coach to watch an official, they're going to be able to tell you right away. He or she's arrogant. He or she is insecure. He or she is, you know, whatever that is. So we have to remember when our game management starts as soon as we make contact with game management or you know, our security or any of that stuff. You know, say things like thank you. Say things like I appreciate that. You know, when a coach questions you on a play, in your heart of hearts, you know you missed it, then by all means say, you know what, I think you have a valid point there. I got to get that play. That's what game management is. It's not about manipulation.
So then, whenever we begin to talk about some of those game management things, obviously one of the things that comes up always is coach issues, you know, coach official conflict, that kind of thing. And I think especially for some of us working lower levels, there is a hesitancy. You know, we don't want to be the one that's quick on the trigger. You don't want that reputation and all. But at the same time, you don't want to allow stuff to happen that's going to create bigger game management issues down the line. And so Matt asked the question, you know, how much does it take for a coach to cross your line? And of course, I think he's wanting to know some communication strategies to help with that. But maybe you could start. What are some hard line kind of things? What are some things that just are not allowable? They've got to be gotten. Because a lot of guys will say, well, you just know it when you see it. But if you haven't seen it yet, then you don't know it.
Yeah, I think the best way to handle this, the best way to answer this question is the hard things are, first things first, you need to listen. You have a play, and a coach is questioning whether or not you got this play right. You need to listen to what they're saying. Because as soon as they say, you're horrible, I've listened to that technical foul. You've gotten personal. They say, that's horrible. Now they're not getting personal with you. That play may be horrible. That call may be horrible. But you're not saying that I'm personally horrible. And that's where we mess up. We mess up because we go right into our defense mechanisms. We put the walls up. We turn our ears off. We close our eyes. All these things happen. And they've said all these things to us. And somebody else who's not involved in the play, maybe in the bleachers or maybe just opposite official, go, man, he did call him horrible, and you know all those things happen because their defense mechanisms aren't up. So if this is, you know, it's not something you can just wake up like we talk about. You've got to really, really train of this. And when you go and you know that you potentially could have a question here, listen. Just listen to what they're saying, because if they say some hard things like you are, you know, instead of that is, or they do just very demonstrative things, you know, throwing chairs, obviously all that stuff is, you know, jackets, whatever it is, all that stuff is obvious. But that's the hard line. For me, the hard line is when you say your. When you say your, my ears perk up. What's he or she going to say next? You're doing a great job. Okay, good. We agree. you know, well, you're not very good. Whoop, hold on a second, technical foul or warning, whatever that is. And I'm not even saying, and I believe most coordinators would agree with me. Just because they say you're horrible doesn't make it a technical foul. But what it makes is it's got to be addressed. We have to address whether there is a warning. If the warnings aren't to be given, then give a technical foul, right? You know, whatever that is. But it has to be addressed when you have antics, you know, on the floor. They've made it very clear to us in the NCAA. You know, they don't want you egregiously on the floor. You know, clear and egregiously on the floor. Then we got to make sure we handle those things. So that's for me. I got to hear the word "your." When I hear the word "your," and then after any kind of mannerisms, I could if I'm listening to what they're saying, chances are they're not just doing mannerisms, right? I've never seen anybody rip their jacket off in silence. You know what I mean? I usually just don't do that. They usually say something with it. So listen to what they're saying. So,
Okay. So whether it's a situation that you've addressed, say with a warning or a technical foul, or there's a coach that's just sniping in your ear as you come up and move down the court, one of the things that's often hard is to kind of regain focus after those confrontations take place.
Yeah.
And William is talking to us. He asked the question, how do you regain focus after a different situation? So that may be that technical on the coach. It could be just a tough call that you had to make, and now you're trying to regain focus with that. How do you do that?
Yeah, I'll go back to my days in baseball when I was a baseball umpire, and I was having trouble. Anytime we have trouble in strike zone, we're calling strikes balls and ball strikes. The first thing I was always taught was go back to the basics. Just go back to the basics. Don't try and be fancy. Just stand, hold still, hold your eyes still, and watch the pitch come in and call balls and strikes like you're supposed to. Back to the basics. When we have tough situations like that, don't worry about extending anymore. Don't worry about trying to help when necessary. Just take care of your third. Get your legs back underneath you again. Handle whatever play, the question you might have. And I've heard younger officials, in the day and age of technology, what do they say? Click, click, delete. The quicker you can delete that play, the better off you're going to be. Or the quicker you come to terms on that play. You know what? I think this coach has probably got a point. If we come to terms on that play, instead of hanging on to it, go, oh, their coach is wrong, and the coach thinks they're right, and the officials think they're right, nobody finds a common ground, and it's impossible to move on. So, for me, I got to get back to the basics. When I'm in a tough situation, in a tough matchup, I'm not worried about doing fabulous things. I'm worried about just taking care of basic stuff.
Okay. One question that really relates specifically to on-court work. Joel asks the question about off-ball officiating on rebounds. There are some plays that are just harder to get than others.
Yep.
And because we're so used to officiating on ball, or waiting for that ball to come into our area view, that sometimes it's that off-ball stuff that just becomes harder to adjudicate. So what are some tips for doing some off-ball officiating?
Yeah. First things first, in rebounding, it's a phrase that I've heard in camps said before, up, down, rebound. That's how you should be refereeing when it comes to rebounding. You need to take the shooter up, down, and then you go to rebounding. That's what you're doing when you have players going up in your primary. The best way to get rebounding in off-ball situations is it's hard, but you gotta let go of the ball. Gotta let go of the ball. I remember when I first started refereeing college basketball, and I was at a camp, and so if my primary was in front of me, the ball was here, I would go like this, right? I would go to the ball and come back to it. I go like that. And a clinician came behind me and said, Jeff, we get it. Everybody, no, you have to know where the ball is. We get that. You can't watch it. And when you're doing this, you're letting go of that. So here, stay on your primary and then just look. And now we're using more of our peripheral opposed to moving our whole head. And when we do that, we become more in tune to what's going on in our primary. We can referee a lot of stuff from our peripheral, from a distance, where we get hung up on magnet to the ball, and we're connected to it, and we just gotta say, let it go. Just let the ball go. And that comes to, when we said about trust and building consistency. If the ball's in your primary, if I'm watching your primary, that means all I'm doing is telling you that I'm not really trusting what you're doing. So I got to really, really focus on off-ball screens, rebounding, things like that. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is it comes from eye speed. Your eye speed really needs to be. You need to work on your eye speed. And then we go, well, what do I do? Would I go around and blink my eyes a lot? Well, we do things like if we're watching primary, off-ball primary, and if the ball's over here and you don't want to look at the ball, then look somewhere else. Look at the clock real quick and come back down. You're working on your eye speed, up and down, back and forth, back and forth. That way you're working on your eye speed. If all you're doing is going like this, all you're working on is your head speed now. You're not working on your eye speed. And your focus, then you have to come back and refocus. It just doesn't work. Work on your eye speed.
Okay. When I begin to think about what we're doing here, what you've been doing through your Edify videos and the other things that you do, it has to do with us collectively getting better. Okay, and so a lot of that stuff is like we just talked about. It's what happens on the court. Some of it is what happens off the court. You call it the mental game, things like that.
Inner game.
Inner game. There we go. Whoever wants to call it that. There you go. But Kelly and Paul both brought up some questions having to do with how we begin to communicate with others to help them get better and to help us get better. And I know you get questions all the time. I've had the privilege of getting to ride with Jeff to a few different games. And I remember one night he finished a game in Macomb, Illinois, and there's no good way to get back to where Jeff lives from Macomb. Like, it's a crazy drive, 2-lane roads all over the place and everything. And I would say that for 75% of that ride, at least, there were different people calling and asking questions, on the way out. As they finished their game, you're getting a call. As this coordinator got a clip, they're calling, they're whatever, And I think one of the reasons they do that is because they know that you care about helping people get better. You're not just doing your game and then going and checking out. You want to help people get better. So Kelly asked the question, how do you give constructive feedback to new officials? Paul goes on and he wants to know, how do you not only provide but receive constructive criticism when you got to go back out and work another half? Hey, we just finished the first half and we had some issues. So both from just a general standpoint of how do you help people along that maybe aren't where you're at yet, okay? And then how do we begin to focus in and do that in the middle of the game where we need to change some things so that we can be consistent as a crew, so that we are on the same page and we don't have game management issues or whatever it is as we go forward. How do you help somebody take those steps?
Well, the first thing I would say is, whether it be at halftime or at the end of the game or whatever it is, or on the road, that if someone is reaching, or if you're reaching out to someone to try and give advice, or somebody's reaching out to you and they're asking your advice, you need to know your audience. It's not going to help me to tell a 35-year veteran that they're doing it wrong. You know what I mean? We have to understand that's the audience. If I have a second-year official like yourself, you can accept that a lot easier because, hey, listen, I just started, you're probably right. You got a 35-year veteran, well, I've been doing it for 35 years, you've been doing it for 15, Jeff, what do you know? So that's what we really need to understand our audience. If we understand our audience, that's going to help our delivery. With younger officials, I'm telling you, I think the best way to do it is use technology, use things they understand. They understand. Younger officials, sometimes younger people and younger generation in general are very nervous talking to people in person. So why not send them a text? Hey, listen, I did a great job, but there's a few things I'd like to discuss. Whenever you get the time, let's discuss those. They go, okay, so now they're like, okay, I'm going to muster up the courage to call Jeff and find out what he wanted. You know what I mean? At their convenience. And then with veteran officials, okay, so now this is an old school. Hey, look, you want to go ahead and grab a burger? Talk about the next game? You know what I mean? Sometimes it takes an extra 30 or 45 minutes to do those things. We can't say, hey, listen, I'd love to give you feedback, and I'm going to give you feedback, but I only got 5 minutes because I'm going to get on the road, so here it is, and I'm going to shoot out. Hope it helps. Teachers don't do that. Teachers, it's 3:30, so bell rings at 3:30, so I got to stop teaching you now. They stick around for 20, 30 minutes to help a student, and that's what we need to do. Now, during the game, I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, will it help?
Okay.
If so-and-so has missed some plays or whatever it is, or marginal, or whatever the scenario is, by me saying something at halftime, is it going to help the second half? I have to know that before I open my mouth. Maybe, just maybe, if you give it enough time, they'll ask. And you can say, whew, okay, good, I'm glad you asked. I was wondering about that play too, or whatever it is. So give it some time. Don't just walk in and say, okay, now we got to talk about this play. You know, do things like, hey, I'm going to go to the restroom, I'll be back in just a minute. You know, get your bearings, whatever it is. You know, think about those things. I heard one time some podcast out there, rehearsal. It's so important. Rehearsal. You don't have an event. You don't have a play. You don't have a musical. You don't have a band concert without having rehearsal. If you're going to discuss certain scenarios, and let's just say a play happens in the first period, well, you need to be rehearsing to yourself. How are you going to bring up this topic at halftime? You got whatever 90 seconds in between periods, or whatever time you have. Take that time to rehearse what you think you might say, and you know, ask yourself, is that how you want to be approached, or whatever that is. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. So when it comes time, you still may change it again when it actually comes time, but you've done some rehearsal. So that's where I'm at.
All right. So then, what happens when you're receiving that criticism from someone, and maybe it's the R on the game, they're giving you criticism. Maybe it's your coordinator who's calling you up after the game. Hey, I watched you on video tonight, and I've got a couple things.
Right.
You know, what's the right way? What's the most beneficial way to respond? Not just to answer their question or to make sure things are okay there, but then to really be able to grow as an official.
First thing is first is I'm going to say is drink the Kool-Aid. If your coordinator or your crew chief or whoever it is decides they're going to give you some advice, drink the Kool-Aid. And then if you still feel like it just wasn't, you know, whatever, that he or she's wrong, you go back to the video and look at it. If you look at the video and you clip the video, send it to 5 other people and say, what do you think of this play? Am I in the wrong position here? Did I do this incorrectly? Is my body language wrong here? Whatever it is, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. When you send out a clip, if you send it out to 5 people, expect 5 people to send it back going, you got it wrong. Because that's going to help. If you send it out going, well, these 5 people better agree with me, and one doesn't, now that person's off the list, that doesn't help you any. That doesn't help you grow at all. And when you ask someone, you know, if you're asking me for advice, that means you're asking for advice. Don't say, I'm asking for advice only if it's good advice, right? Only if it's only the positive things, please. The negative things lead you somewhere else. You're asking for it all. So I think that's I forget where I started on that, but it's so important that we just drink the Kool-Aid and understand, and okay, I get it. And then if you still don't like it, go back in video and prove yourself wrong, or prove him wrong, or whatever it is. You don't have to prove him wrong. You don't have to say, oh, hey, I looked at the video, you were wrong. That's not going to help either.
Yeah.
You know, I say this all the time. You know, people say stuff to either make themselves feel better. That's the only reason they're saying it. They're not doing it because it's important that they feel better. So that, I don't know, was that deep you?
It was probably me. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that's most frustrating for me as a newer official, I don't qualify as young, but as newer
That's
official,
right, yeah.
is
I don't qualify as young.
when I ask the question of somebody, you know, hey, you got anything for me tonight? Did you see anything out there, whatever? And they're just like, oh, I thought you were fine. I thought you were great, whatever. Well, hopefully, you know, I'm getting better. You know, I want to be doing that, but I haven't been doing this long enough to not have something that I could be working on. And sometimes it's because it's a game where it's just hard for them to see something, or whatever. You know, it's an intense game, everybody's on their primary, that kind of stuff. But most of the time, if you have an experienced official working that game, they're going to see a thing or two that's at least potential for improvement. And so one thing I would say, you know, especially as Paul asked the question, I know Kelly said, you know, how do you give constructive feedback to officials? For me, when I have an official tell me things to work on, I feel much better than if they don't give me anything. Because if they don't give me anything, I'm all sitting there going, well, they think I'm enough of a lost cause that they're not willing to invest any time in this, you know? But if there's something they see, okay, that gives me something to work on. The other thing, because of the crews that I work on and all, there are a lot of officials that I just don't hear asking those questions.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that, you know, especially those of us that are newer, I mean, we need to be asking those questions, whether it's with the crew at the time or sending the video to somebody we trust. And I asked, you know, Jeff a question the other day on a video play that I had, and you know, we're going to look at it today. When we're done shooting video, we're going to go look at it, and we'll find out if I was in a good position, if I had the call right or not. Regardless, the mechanic looked great. I just want to put that out there. But
I agree.
But the call may not have been right, so we're going to find that out so I can get better. There was something that came up this last week.
Hold on a second.
Yep,
So you said lost cause.
Yep.
This is two things. If an official said, "Hey, everything's fine," you're either one or two things. You're a lost cause, or those officials don't care about the other people getting better.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So, those of you out there watching, if you're asked about something, find something, because what you're saying, one of those two things: either you're no good, you're a lost cause, or I don't care, I got to get back to my house. So, go ahead.
No, I think that's right. We had a situation happen this last weekend, and I thought it was very interesting. It happened to be a holiday tournament, collegiate holiday tournament. There had been, rarely do we work the same teams 2 days in a row.
Right.
That just doesn't happen very often. Those tournaments are kind of unique situations. But it could be, depending on the conference that you're working in, you are at somebody's home game this week, and next week somebody gets hurt, and you get thrown on a game where that team's the away team the next week, and so you see them within a week. And there was a situation where a coach didn't agree with something the night before. A couple members of that crew are on the game the next day, and still bringing stuff up, still dealing with it. How do you help them move past that? Where do you begin to draw that line when that kind of thing happens? Coach, that was last game. It's not tonight.
You listening? You made your point. Done. You've made your point. Whoever you are, Billy, Fred, Sally, Jane, whatever, I hear you, and you've made your point. Now here we are. Let's move forward. What happens is we try and we try and we try to continue to talk about, they're still upset, I'm going to still talk about it. And it just goes all this back and forth. And now you're 20 minutes into the game and you're still talking about something that is gone. Mm-hmm. So you need to just, a simple phrase like, "You've made your point, Bill." And 9 times out of 10, they get it. You've made your point. They get it.
Okay. Another thing that came out of that, rarely is there a lot of interaction between coaches and the table.
Right.
We talk all the time about how the table's part of our crew. Mm-hmm. They make us better when they're on top of things. Mm-hmm. But we also know there are times when they may not be on top of things. Sure. So we got to go deal with that. How do you handle if a coach begins attacking the table? Maybe they're attacking the number of timeouts. Maybe it's a scoring issue or dispute or whatever. To kind of bring in that crew mentality that we often talk about. How do you protect your table, or do you?
Yeah, I protect them. These are two things. So if it's the home coach yelling at the home table, I usually let him have a little bit of latitude because he's the one who brought them into the game. Mm-hmm. Okay, whatever he may decide he feels like he needs to do. Because at that point in time, chances are, in a JUCO game or Division III game, this coach said, "I need 3 baseball players, and you're hired for the year to do this." So that coach is their boss. Mm-hmm. So if he feels like he needs to scold them for whatever reason, then we let them do that. To an extent. If it's a visiting coach, and they're doing that, I put a stop to it right away and say, "Listen, I know I've been to your place before, and the table's messed up. I know I have. I just said it not even 2 weeks ago, because the table had messed up or whatever it was, and the coach was, a little upset. So, man, I've been to your place before, and they messed up. And you know what that coach said? Oh, I don't remember that. And they're off to something else. They get it. They just need to be reminded that they're caught up in the moment. They need to be reminded that everyone is not perfect. Table included, officials included. So if we could think about those things, and of course, I'm going to go back to rehearsal. I rehearse my lines all the time. I rehearse what I would say in certain situations. I don't just, when somebody says it, I don't just spurt out. Like, did you just make that up? No, I didn't just make it up. I've been working on it for 3 months now. Mm-hmm. And I got a chance to use it. So, rehearsal.
All right. I think that covers the questions that people had today. Yeah. Good info.
That's good stuff. How long did we go?
We went 39 minutes.
Okay, good. So that's perfect. So,
yeah.
All right. So I just gave you 40 minutes, which was, exhausting. I'm going to have some lunch. So remember, jeffcross22@gmail.com. I'm going to ask this. If this is something you would like more of, not necessarily every week because I don't have the time, but if you would like more of this 40-minute scenario opposed to a 5 or 6 minute scenario, I need to know that. Send me an email, jeffcross22@gmail.com, post something on Edgify, send me a text, whatever it is. And then obviously, thank you everyone for putting plays up, for sending me plays. It gives me a chance to break those down, and I just put a couple up, I think, 2 days ago. So thank you everyone for doing that. Thank you everyone for taking the opportunity to invest in officiating, and it's because of people like yourself and everyone else out there that we're gonna change the face. It may take some time, but we're gonna change the face. So thanks, Chad. I appreciate it, brother. All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.